What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Monday, October 1st, 2018. And, boy, this has been a weekend for bad technical problems. On Friday, the reason we didn't have a show is that my main desktop computer, which everything runs through, suffered a pretty serious failure, and I spent most of the weekend fixing it. It's up and running now. Let's see. We're dealing with tech issues with the system that we normally use to communicate. So, hang on. It's not letting me. Just bear with me for a little bit while we deal with these technical issues. Okay. All right. So anyway, it's Monday, October 1st, 2018. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. The war fever is just going crazy all over the place here. And Mike and I are trying to get this technical issue sorted out so we can go back to our normal sound system. Anyway, right now we're going to leave the phone lines closed because Mike is obviously very busy. And, well, let's just get right on into the news here. Obviously, the big news continues to be Brett Kavanaugh. We're in yet another week of Kavanaughsia. And what was really interesting is last week when Christine Ford finally testified, they brought in order that it not just be a whole bunch of, white guys grilling this woman on her sexual past. They hired this professional sex crimes prosecutor, Rachel Mitchell. And I do apologize for this. Anyway, there we go. All right. I'm switching headsets.
Put up the volume. That would probably help things a little bit. Okay, so we're back to normal. And like we keep saying in the begs for donations, this equipment wears out, especially here in Hawaii, where we have all the salt air. And what makes fixing computers on Oahu hard is all the little shops where you could buy parts and cards and everything. They've all gone out of business. And if you go to a big store like Best Buy, they don't sell computer parts, or very few of them. Their model is, if it's broken, just throw it away and buy a whole new one. And the writing is on the wall. I'm going to have to look for a Windows 7 box and start building a replacement system. But for the moment, this machine is still running. All right, getting on back. So if you can donate, we do appreciate that. So anyway, they got in this professional sex crime prosecutor, Rachel Mitchell. She's nonpartisan, third party. She's got more than 25 years experience prosecuting sex crimes in the state of Arizona. And she asked a lot of questions of Christine Ford, and observers at the time said it feels kind of like softball. Didn't push her, didn't really get on her case, and a lot of people were thinking, well, this is going to go nowhere. But the big surprise is apparently Rachel Mitchell issued her report saying that she finds Christine Ford completely unbelievable. And mind you, this is someone who has been investigating this kind of thing for 25 years. And she came on out saying that Christine Ford did not offer a consistent account of when the alleged assault happened. Christine Ford actually struggled to identify Judge Kavanaugh as the assailant by name. And things were just changing all over the place. She claimed to have no memory of key details of the night in question. So that's all coming apart here. And a little bit of a reminder to Christine Ford and to these other accusers, it is in fact a crime to lie to the Senate, a real crime with penalties. So just something to keep in mind here. Now, already we're seeing liberal propaganda pouring out all over the net saying, well, the fact that all of the witnesses that Christine Ford claimed had seen the event couldn't remember it, that's not really the same thing as saying it did not happen. They're trying to get back into this. It may have happened. We still haven't proven that it didn't happen, and just refusing to give this up. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And again, the last one of the witnesses that Christine Ford claimed would verify her account is saying, no, she's issued a statement through her lawyer saying, no, didn't see it happen. So all Christine Ford has is Christine Ford. And everybody that she lined up to say they'll support me, they aren't. None of them are saying they have any information to support her story. Now, looking at the credibility of some of the other accusers, this interesting little story popped out. This is Julie Swetnick, the one who was out there saying that Kavanaugh was at these parties where girls were being drugged and gang raped and all these other horrible things. Apparently, back in 1992, she suffered a fall on a train and sued the Washington Metro Transit Authority for roughly $500,000 in damages, claiming that she had lost that much in income because she had been working as an actress and a model at the time, and that she lost work. They weren't going to hire her to be a model. And Swetnick listed as a witness a gentleman named Nam Ko, who supposedly owned Konam Studios, to verify that, yeah, he couldn't hire her while her nose had all that damage here. Well, Nam Ko has come on out saying, no, he didn't own a studio, and he never hired Swetnick for modeling work. So she's just an opportunist, and she comes with spectacular stories, trying to get things, in this case, just getting money. Now, another one of the accusers who sort of came and went very fast, and it's going to be obvious why, a guy named Jeffrey Catalan came forward to accuse Kavanaugh of assaulting a woman on a boat in Rhode Island. And Catalan sent the accusation to Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, one of the primary Democratic operatives who was helping to construct this attack. And Whitehouse informed the media and the Judiciary Committee, yeah, we got him. We got another witness to an actual assault. And then Jeffrey Catalan basically said that he made it all up. So now Chairman Chuck Grassley is looking at a criminal investigation of Jeffrey Catalan because it is a crime with penalties to lie to the Senate here. Alan Dershowitz is out there saying that for any other crime but sexual assault, you would be entitled to due process, a presumption of innocence, and the requirement of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And for some reason, when it's a white guy being accused of sexual assault, even from decades ago, the rules just fly out the window. Oh, the accusation is the guilt here. And Dershowitz was on Fox and Friends, and he said, imagine if a liberal Democrat president had appointed the first Muslim American to the Supreme Court, and somebody just said, oh, yeah, I remember he was a terrorist when he was 17 years old. The ACLU would be all over this case. You cannot presume guilt. That's Code Napoleon, and it didn't work out very well. For that matter, neither did Napoleon. Well, now that the FBI is going to finish up this new investigation this week, one more week, will it ever be over? And now the Democrats are saying, well, really, forget about all that sexual assault thing. Maybe that really didn't work. Like, we've got to talk to him about his drinking. Kavanaugh's a drinker. A lot of politicians are drinkers. Harry Truman used to call it striking a blow for liberty. In fact, he used to say there's only one thing worse than a man who drinks, and that's one who doesn't. So the Democrats, now they're shifting the goalpost is what they're doing. Okay, they can't get the assault thing going to derail the vote. Oh, he's a heavy drinker. Next, they'll be looking at his overdue library books from 20 years ago. I mean, they're that desperate here. And I hope Kavanaugh is wearing his Kevlar undies, because we're seeing this trend toward actual, real violence out there. And Mike Adams came out with an article basically warning conservative senators, conservative Supreme Court justices, look after your security. The left has become unhinged. And remember, we had that deranged man who targeted conservative lawmakers on that softball field, injuring Representative Steve Scalise. And there was that violent physical assault on Senator Rand Paul by his unhinged Democratic neighbor. You cannot ignore there is a real danger out there, and I hope Kavanaugh has excellent security around it. In fact, I would be very honest. If I were Donald Trump, I would be putting Secret Service protection on him right now. Is another example of this new violent trend, which I find disgusting. Oh, and by the way, the phone lines are now open now that we got our little audio system up. 800-313-9443. Over at Georgetown, there is this associate professor, Christine Fair, who went on out basically tweeting, saying that the white Republicans should be castrated and fed to swine. That all of the white GOP senators on Thursday's Kavanaugh hearing, they deserve miserable deaths. That is a direct quote, which apparently didn't violate Twitter's code of community conduct. Okay. Now, Senator Cotton is saying that there's going to be a Barr investigation into the Democrats who represented Christine Ford. Because apparently Christine Ford, remember, she wanted to be very private about this. She sent the letter to Dianne Feinstein, asked for confidentiality. Somebody leaked it out. That's going to cause another mess. And that, remember, she went back and forth about not wanting a public hearing. Well, she always had the option of a private behind closed door meeting, but her lawyers that were basically recommended to her by Democrats didn't inform her of that. They didn't tell her she had that option. And Senator Tom Cotton is saying that requires a Barr investigation, because when you're a lawyer, your top priority is supposed to be your client, not your political buddies lurking there in the back room trying to get Kavanaugh here. And of course, the other big stink is that the leaking of Ford's letter. And it's now come on out that Ford wanted to just make this accusation from the dark, from the privacy. And Cotton is now saying that Feinstein's office and her staffers will be investigated to find who leaked it. And there'll be a little bit of a mess about that. I just read a poll. Washington Times put up a poll. And right now, 2/3 of respondents do not believe Christine Ford. And the poll, like all online polls, may be subject to trolling to try and drive the numbers up. There's an interesting little article that came out of 12160, basically saying the Democrats do not understand the magnitude of how rational Americans are reacting to the Kavanaugh hearing. And this article goes in with a lot of tweets that are just showing Americans are just disgusted with all of this. Apparently, there have been a lot of calls into C-SPAN saying it's gone on way too far. The Democrats are disgraceful. Even the pastor at Claire's church railed against the hearings as part of his sermon yesterday about just how vicious, dirty it all was here. Over in Missouri, a new poll is showing that Missouri voters are rejecting Senator McCaskill. Ever since he started opposing Kavanaugh, he's starting to sink in the polls. I'm sorry, she is sinking in the polls. Senator Claire McCaskill's fallen behind her Republican opponent due to her opposition to Kavanaugh. This is a poll from Remington Research. Now, it's still a tight race, but it may be a bit of a surprise come November that voters are going to remember the Democratic shenanigans and say, I don't want any more of this in our government. We have to bring back civility. We have to bring back due process. We have to bring back the presumption of innocence before we start truly getting into a witch hunt hysteria and innocent people will be hurt. Meanwhile, Paul Craig Roberts, once again, has raised a valid point. Where does our attention belong? Should it be on Kavanaugh or on Yemen? And it is a valid point. We are being conditized with all this Kavanaugh stuff. We're not seeing any corporate media reporting on what's going on in Yemen or even what's going on in Syria. There's like a blackout. I mean, Trump's on the TV right now, just handed out a medal. It's all distraction, which makes me wonder if there is a big false flag coming, that they want to just shock us here. Okay, Democratic Representative Robert O'Rourke is trying to unseat Senator Ted Cruz in the upcoming midterm election. And he got caught in a whopper of a lie that was so bad, even the liberal Washington Post. Even the liberal Washington Post had to give him 4 Pinocchios. And it seems that many years ago, O'Rourke had a drunk driving incident where he tried to flee the scene. And he acknowledges the drunk driving incident. But when he was talking about the story, he denied trying to leave the scene, which would make it a hit and run, only to be contradicted by witnesses and the police who were there. So he's already out there trying to remanufacture his history. And again, even the liberal media was saying, oh, come on, we got you dead to rights on this one. O'Rourke has also been flagged for campaign finance violations for accepting excessive and impermissible donations from individuals from outside the country. Now, O'Rourke's campaign is saying it's a simple mistake. We're trying to bring in the money. We're rushing very hard for the campaign. It was just an honest mistake. I would like to double check that. But it's a mistake in his favor, and that makes it suspicious, to put it delicately. But everybody I've talked to around here, they're looking at this spectacle with O'Rourke, and they're just saying it's ugly. It has shown the Democrats to be the party of ugly. And I think it is going to be a factor in November's elections. So anyway, we're coming up here on a commercial break. And when we come on back, a little more domestic politics, then into the war zones. You're not going to believe the insanity that's going on out there. So we're going to take a break, and I'll be right back. Okay, well, I'm just going to start talking until somebody communicates with me as to what the situation is over here. So, do you remember the Awan brothers, especially Imran Awan? And he was finally arrested on bank fraud charges. But behind that was this scandal involving the Capitol building's computer networks and many congressional computers that were being maintained by the Awan brothers. And there are indications that they were conducting espionage. And even after getting fired by members of Congress for stealing computers and data systems, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was then the Democratic National Committee chair, kept him on, let him have access to her emails and files, even gave him passwords to things that he really should not have had. And notice how this all just went away. All right, folks, if you'll just give me a minute, I am going to try and reach our control room by phone and find out what's going on. We were talking about the Awan brothers. Were they running an espionage ring? Who were they selling the information to? Were they connected to the espionage ring that we all suspect hovered around Hillary Clinton's private email server? Yet another investigation that went absolutely nowhere. So it would be kind of good to know here. Would somebody from the RBN audience email me that you're getting the show? I know it's going out on YouTube. Okay, let's turn to the war zones. There's utter insanity out there. Damascus is now going to evacuate people on Al Rukban camp in the U.S. occupied area. And under the agreement, the local leaders of the camp will hand over a list of, okay, hang on, I'm getting signals from our control room. Okay, so we are going out to the RBN audience. Good, I just don't have a feed coming back to me to let me know what's going on. Okay. No, I still don't have feed. No, I do. Oh, hang on. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna take a break here and try and solve this very quickly so we can take phone calls. So anyway, there's a humanitarian crisis going on in this Syrian refugee camp here. They're trying to get some aid in there. Over in Idlib, remember when Turkey and Russia came up with this deal where they were going to create a buffer zone, if you will. And, well, it sounded like a good idea in order to avoid an escalation of the conflict there. Unfortunately, the problem is the U.S.-backed militants are not leaving this buffer zone. They're saying, we're going to stay here and we're going to continue to do what we're doing. So it was a good plan, but we're back to square one. The largest rebel group in southern Idlib is just rejecting the agreement completely. And so we're kind of back to square one on that. Russia has begun the delivery of the S-300 missile system to Syria. Ah, there's my feed. Okay. All right, everything's back to where it should be. We're going to take another commercial break. I'm going to go beat my head against the wall someplace, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And let's see, I'm reading from the control room here. It's been kind of a crazy day. Actually, it was a crazy weekend. Okay, getting on back to the news here. Russia has begun delivery of the S-300 to Syria. And is basically saying the Western powers should stop trying to undermine UN-led efforts to end the 7-year conflict, which is basically what's going on here. Is the UN wants to sort it all out, arrive at a political solution where everybody's happy. The US wants Assad out. Netanyahu wants Iran out. And it's a very, very tense situation. Now, Netanyahu is calling the supply of S-300 missiles to Syria irresponsible. Now, Syria had actually bought these missiles many, many years ago, and Israel put pressure on Russia to not deliver them. But it was the downing of the Ilyushin 20 that changed Russia's mind, and Putin authorized the delivery of the missiles, and they're coming on in. And Netanyahu is out there, he's trying to ride both sides of the fence. He's saying, let's continue the deconfliction, but at the same time, Israel will continue to do what it has to do to defend itself. Well, Israel isn't defending itself, it's attacking another country. And if you fly into somebody else's country with a warplane, with bombs on the wings, and you drop those bombs, you are likely to get shot at. And that's something that anybody who's a military pilot understands. You get to fly some really cool aircraft, but there is a distinct possibility that somebody on the ground or somebody behind you is going to shoot holes in it. Now, this story worries me a lot because apparently a number of unidentified gunmen attacked a depot of Tahrir al-Sham Huyat, which is part of al-Nusra, in Idlib province and stole their chemical gas cylinders. And apparently they got sarin and chlorine gas cylinders after killing 4 guards. Now, this article is saying that there has become a lot of infighting among the various groups, the different rebels. They're starting to fight amongst themselves, which is actually a good thing. But my concern is when those chemical weapons actually get used, the Western media will say, oh my goodness, it was Assad, and therefore we're going to go back on in. Now, here was a big surprise here. As you know, last week there was an attack on a military parade in Iran. And a lot of people got killed. And Iran has been pointing fingers at a lot of different places. But apparently they decided that they were going to pin the blame on one of the U.S.-backed groups inside Syria. And they launched a missile attack, which surprised a lot of people because nobody expected Iran had missiles of that range, and they just sent a signal. Iran can basically hit any of the U.S.-occupied areas in Syria, and that is going to amp up the tension in the area as well. Austria's foreign minister is out there saying that Syria is a victim of wars fought in the name of oil. And yes, quite a few of these wars are fought on the basis of access to oil or oil pipeline rights of way. But again, I think he's fallen into this trap of thinking that wars are always started by just one reason. There's a lot of different agendas at work in Syria. Oil is certainly one of them. Economics is another one. Expansionism by Israel is another one. And all these agendas get together and the wars get fought and people die. And the area is just very unstable. Now, here's an interesting little story. This came out of FortRuss.com. And basically, they're talking about how the U.S. is threatening to make life of Assad regime as miserable as possible. And it's announcing that the United States, along with its allies, will implement a strategy of isolation in Syria if President Bashar Assad maintains the political process, basically if he stays on. Because that's been the U.S. goal all along. Assad has to go. Assad has to go. But what's interesting is this Fort Russ article is saying that this announcement basically is conceding that the United States has not been able to remove Assad. So they're going to throw a tantrum and they're going to put crushing sanctions on Syria and behave like the global bully of the UN Security Council and rejected Trump's so-called ramifications of that we'll talk about when we get into the economic section of our talking points here. Now, Netanyahu, once again, out there trying to ramp up the Get Iran rhetoric, is claiming that Iran has a secret nuclear warehouse with 300 tons of nuclear material. Oh my goodness, look how much nuclear material they have. Reminds me a lot of his little cartoon bomb here. And in response, Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said, no, we don't. We have not developed a secret nuclear site. And reminded everybody that Israel is the only regime in the Middle East with a secret and undeclared nuclear weapons program, including an actual atomic arsenal. And Iran is calling on Israel to basically fess up sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and allow IAEA inspections. Over in Yemen, the people of Yemen are basically trying to fight back, and they are now starting to lob missiles toward other countries that are involved in the so-called coalition against them. Apparently, they fired a missile at the Dubai International Airport, and according to a Houthi spokesman, the United Arab Emirates should expect more attacks if the aggression in Yemen continues. Now, the United States Air Force is still continuing to refuel the Saudi warplanes that are bombing Yemen. So the U.S. government is up to its neck in this. And apparently at one point there was a report that the U.S. is also supplying targeting information. Trump is out there playing salesman, which is a big part of what he used to do before he became president here. And he's calling on Saudi Arabia to buy more weapons from the United States of America. And even more interesting, that Saudi Arabia should pay more for them because Trump wants to cancel the subsidies. See, that's one of the ways U.S. weapons get sold around the world. The U.S. will go into a country and say, we want to sell you the F-35. And the country says, oh, I can't afford that. It's $100 million each. And the U.S. says, we'll write you a subsidy check that makes the price a little bit more attractive. Well, Trump is now pulling back on that. But he's still out there arm twisting other countries to buy U.S. weapons. I guess that's about the only thing the United States is good for, and we're not even really all that good at that anymore. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit as well. Over in Israel, 6 Palestinians were killed and 90 others injured in last Friday's ongoing Great March of Return demonstrations along the Gaza-Israel buffer zone. And this included teenagers. One was 14, one 12-year-old. And I admire their tenacity. I admire their courage. They're not going to give up. Gaza's economy is on the verge of collapse. And of course, without a functioning economy, there's not going to be any chance of peace because people are getting desperate. They're hungry. There will be rioting. Maybe that's Israel's goal, is to just turn Gaza into a big riot zone and let the Palestinians tear each other apart. And that's something else you're not hearing on the American corporate media. Now, you know how the Israel lobby in Great Britain has been on Jeremy Corbyn's case. And they've been screaming, anti-Semite. And Labor is bad. Labor are a bunch of anti-Semites, which did not gain the traction they wanted. And there is a very good chance that the Labor Party, with Jeremy Corbyn, will gain power in Great Britain. And as payback for all of this anti-Semite screaming, Corbyn is saying that the Labor government would recognize the Palestinian state as soon as it takes office. Corbyn also denounced President Trump for moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and for cutting funding to the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine. So the rest of the world is finally starting to speak up at all this ugly, ugly behavior. Apparently, up in Ukraine, the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, is up there trying to basically divide Ukraine's church. Now, there is a Ukrainian Orthodox Church which is currently under the jurisdiction of the Patriarchate of Moscow. And the Ukrainian Autocephalous Orthodox Church, boy, there's a name for you, is asking for a separation and to be granted independence. Now, last April, Ukrainian lawmakers reaffirmed Kiev's traditional links to the Patriarchate of Constantinople, The Council of Bishops at the Church of Constantinople confirmed that, yes, in fact, this church may be granted independence without seeking prior approval from the Patriarchate of Moscow. So let's get a good religious war going, shall we, everybody? This story is scary. This story is going to keep you up tonight, I guarantee. The United States Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke, said last Friday that the United States is ready to impose a naval blockade on Russia to prevent Russia from exporting its oil products to other countries and to basically hamper the Russian energy exports. Now, the excuse is that they think Russia's presence in Syria is an attempt to open up that marketplace. But I mean, can you imagine how dangerous this is? Blockade is an act of war. The U.S. has just gone totally rogue on this. In the run-up to Pearl Harbor, a naval blockade on scrap metal and oil was one of the tactics Roosevelt used to goad Japan into the attack on Pearl Harbor. And if they keep going this way, they're really going to start a war. And I don't think that's a really, really good idea. Apparently, there's been another little bit of upset over in Serbia because apparently Kosovo's special forces made their way into a Serbian enclave on Saturday. Now, apparently, this is an area that's a little bit in dispute, but they had an agreement that everybody was just going to keep hands off. This was an agreement between Belgrade and Pristina. But apparently the Kosovar Special Forces positioned itself around the dam on Gazavoda Lake and took control of the local hydroelectric power station. And they detained several Serbian citizens. Apparently, the president of Kosovo was there with them. So the Serbian military was on high alert. And I can understand why that would be the case here. Great Britain has announced they're going to send 800 troops to the Arctic to stop Russian aggression as the ice caps melt. This is coming from Gavin Williamson. And they're going to be deployed to Norway next year. So as global warming takes hold and the ice cap melts, we'll be in a position to stop that Russian aggression. Everybody's flinging troops and weapons all over the planet. You have to wonder, where do they get it all? Well, they're gutting their national economies to pay for it all. Over in the South China Sea, the Chinese Air Force has held a live fire war drill just days after the U.S. exercise ended. And China is obviously very concerned about U.S. nuclear-capable B-52 bombers holding exercises over the East China Sea and the Sea of Japan last month. So China is out there strutting its stuff, and again, it is the South China Sea. Can we not find a better way to get along with each other, because this is getting dangerous? Apparently, as part of this situation, there was another encounter between a Chinese warship and a U.S. destroyer. This was the USS Decatur, and the U.S. Decatur was being blocked by the Chinese warship, and we had to turn the ship. That's serious business. We had to turn our ship. Well, yeah, that's what that little wheel is for. You turn the wheel, the ship turns. But China is saying that the U.S. does not have a right to be coming that close to those islands. And the U.S., of course, is running these so-called freedom and navigation exercises to thump its chest and say, we can go anywhere that we want. And that's because we're who we are. Tensions between the U.S. and China have risen to the point where this major diplomatic and security meeting which was planned for next month, may be canceled. So we've reached the point right now where the U.S. and China have stopped talking to each other, and that is a very, very dangerous situation. Sometimes it feels like the world has just gone insane. Or maybe I actually died and this is hell. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And over in North Korea, things between North and South Korea are doing really good. Things between North Korea and the United States, not so good. Because North Korea has announced that there is no way they will disarm their nuclear arsenal before the U.S. ends the sanctions. And this is where the U.S. policy of you give us everything we want first and then we'll do something nice for you is backfiring, because that doesn't sit well with the Asian mindset. And there have been too many cases where one nation will give the other nation everything they want and they don't get anything back. Israel, Palestine, for a good example. So North Korea is saying that this refusal by the United States to respond to any of the concessions made by North Korea so far is destroying trust that anything can actually be accomplished. Now, you know, after Trump and Kim Jong-un had their meeting, Kim Jong-un allowed the remains of soldiers who died at the start of the Korean War to be repatriated. They've closed down the nuclear test site. They tore down a missile test stand. They've torn down one other launch platform. Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in are getting all buddy-buddy. They're opening up the rail lines and the bridges across the DMZ. They're allowing people to travel back and forth. And they're talking reunification, which is where I think they're definitely headed. And you just know the United States is going to find some way to muck that up. They don't want the Koreas reunified. They want to have a villain that they can wag at us here. All right, so let's talk about the F-35. We've been talking about America's less than stellar weapon systems. They look good, cost a lot of money, usually not all that great. The good news was last Thursday when the Marines conducted the first ever airstrike with its version of the F-35, which was a hit against a Taliban target in Afghanistan. The bad part came on Friday morning in South Carolina when one of the Marines' F-35 jets crashed during a training mission. Now, the pilot ejected safely, good for him or her, but this was a full-blown crash of an F-35. Over $100 million. It's a total loss. Now, here's a very interesting article out of Global Research. And it's saying that one of the reasons that the U.S. was so against Russia's S-300 air defense system in Syria is that it might prove to be far more effective at seeing the F-35 than the sales brochure said. All right, there's the music. I'm going to take a break for station identification. We're going to be back with more about this story after these few words. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So we're talking about one possible reason why the U.S. was so adamant that the S-300 not be given to Syria. And the take from this article, which comes out of Global Research, is that the S-300 sophisticated radar may prove to be a challenge for the F-35. Right now, there are countries all over the world who are buying the F-35 on the promise that it is perfectly stealthy, that it can't be seen. Well, what if that turns out to be less than true? What would that do to sales of what is a very expensive piece of kit with low flight performance? Remember last week there was that story where a Russian Sukhoi pilot claims to have gotten a radar lock on an F-22. If U.S. stealth isn't that stealthy, if the Russian radars are able to detect these aircraft, that's a game changer right there. Now, Israel has been claiming that they're using their F-35s over Syria, but that may come to a halt because the U.S. may put pressure on them to say, we dare not let the F-35 go up against the S-300, let alone the S-400, because we're in the business of selling these things to other countries. Right now, the entire claim about the aircraft is based on evaluations provided by Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer, and on the tests carried out by the military who commissioned it to Lockheed Martin. And we know how military tests are always being rigged. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a wonderful book and a funny movie called The Pentagon Wars. And it's a dramatization, satirization of the procurement process for the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And if you have not seen it, hunt it down. It's probably somewhere out there on Hulu. And it is a true story. As silly and as absurd as it all seems, it's a true story. And when I was involved with NASA, I got to see some of this stuff myself. Not with NASA, but with other places. All right, let's talk about the economic news. Article coming out of Information Clearinghouse talking about Washington's sanctions machine. And it starts with the speculation that coming from the world of business, New York real estate, that Trump may truly believe that if you inflict enough economic pain on someone, they will ultimately surrender and agree to do whatever it is you want. And while that may work with small businesses and real estate, it is far less certain to succeed in international relations since countries are not as vulnerable to pressure as are individual investors or developers. So this gets us back to China, where we have all these sanctions being thrown against China for daring to buy their weapons against, from Russia, along with all the tariffs. And the world is getting very angry. I don't know about you, I can sense it. By the way, speaking of the tariffs, somebody has estimated that Trump's tariffs will add $7,000 to the cost of a new car. Just something you might want to think about. Another very enlightening article here came out of Zero Hedge, talking about how the U.S. Department of Commerce has thrown more sanctions on 12 Russian corporations that are, quote, acting contrary to the national security or foreign policy interests of the U.S., end quote. The notice has been published in the Federal Register, which means unless Congress intervenes within 30 days, it becomes the rules. And so U.S. corporations are banned from exporting dual-use goods to the sanctioned companies. But looking at the list of companies, these companies have no relation to defense production. They're all with Russia's civil aviation industry, which is now, it's rising, it's growing. People are buying their aircraft. They're a threat to Boeing and Airbus. So let's just sanction them. Let's prevent them from making, we can't compete with them. We'll just shut them down. All right, we're going to take a phone call now from Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm just kind of enjoying, I was almost laughing watching those hearings with that Ford lady in Kavanaugh. Do the Democrats have any idea of the optics of that lawyer, the two lawyers that were on each side of her? I mean, it was, I hate to bring it up, but you got two obvious Jewish lawyers with this lady, with this 35-year-old sexual accusation, and then you got on the other side the choir boy Catholic guy that likes beer, I mean, no offense, but for somebody that's kind of politically incorrect, it was almost comical. I don't know, I've not heard anybody comment on that side of it. But you talk about the optics. I mean, and then Feinstein there. The Democrats, it's Feinstein, it's Blumenthal, it's a Japanese lady, it's Cory Booker. I'm just commenting on it because, most people are scared to, as far as the mainstream media. But if the Democrats think they made any points with Middle America on this, they're out of their minds. I mean, somebody should tell them, tone it down. I mean, to just attack white people and white men, without a cause. It's one thing if you have a cause. It's another thing to invent a charade and a show trial, and then to just not cover it up. I mean, they should have had some waspy-looking lawyer instead of that bull dyke. She was just something you would have seen from a World War II Nazi propaganda video. I just couldn't believe that they were that stupid, because a lot of symbols go into your subconscious mind. It's not even conscious. And I just couldn't, I just thought, oh my God, I just can't believe how dumb the Democrats are on this.
Yeah, I agree with that article that we mentioned earlier in the show. Democrats really don't understand how bad this looks to ordinary Americans. And those ordinary Americans will be voting this November. In fact, if anything, I'm getting a sense that GOP voters are being motivated by all this. And we're seeing poll results that show the Democrats are slipping behind. And we know they're going to try and steal it. They've got all the illegal immigrants that are going to be out there voting. But this revulsion, this rejection of what was surely the most disgusting display of partisan politics in U.S. history could actually tip the election back to the GOP.
Well, after Hillary lost and they played that whole politics of division, you figure the Democrats would try to make an effort to get the Catholic worker, the old Reagan Democrat, the union man, the white working class. But this whole thing just blows that whole thing, any kind of outreach they would have had to Middle America and the working man, out of the water. One other thing I'd like to comment, and the whole Bill Cosby thing.
Yeah.
Do you know that most black people I know, their idea of the whole Bill Cosby thing is he was a cultural icon to black America. And then to have this
to all of America,
and I've heard him talk
to all of
about
America. When I was a kid, I loved his albums. I was a huge fan.
I watched the Fat Albert show. The comic that was on it was on TV. It was a cartoon. Hey. But
well,
he wasn't an icon, but mostly,
Joe, you need to go back a little earlier in time, back to the record albums made of his stand-up routine, to things like "To Russell, My Brother, Whom I Slept With." The stuff was masterfully written, and he just performed so flawlessly, and that's why he was such a huge hit. And it wasn't just the black community that liked him; everybody liked him. He actually back then
I
worked to pull people together.
I liked him too, but I'm trying to talk about the politics of his conviction at this time.
Yeah.
If you talk to black people about what happened to Bill Cosby, one of their big gripes is they had to go back 10, 15 years, and then this whole thing with Kavanaugh is playing right into that. I'll guarantee you to have it fresh in people's mind. And that's why I thought Cory Booker and Kamala Harris started quieting down towards the end. I think the Democrats have people wired up like Clockwork Orange, and they check their poll results, monitoring it.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, this whole Kavanaugh thing, with right on the heels of Bill Cosby conviction, is not going to play well with black people, because they're mad. They're mad about having to go back 20 years to find stuff to convict this guy. They feel like Bill Cosby was railroaded. And then to have the optics of what was going on right in front of them, I'm just curious. I haven't heard anybody make that connection with Bill Cosby, but I think that's going to really blow up in the Democrats' face also.
Well, all I can say,
the Democrat Party is a party of radical feminist bull dyke lesbian Jews, and black people are going to see that. That's the optics of it.
Yes.
And I think black people see through it too.
Well, what I would like the black population of America to understand is how badly they have been played in terms of violence in the streets, which makes all blacks look bad. When you have Antifa out there, or rather Black Lives Matter out there causing acts of violence, it makes the entire black population look bad. They can't be happy with that.
Well, their leadership is subverted through the FBI and Soros and deep state groups to create Black Lives Matter and to create black militancy. That's all like created by the deep state and the state. But what I'm hoping for is Trump with his politically incorrectness and guys like Kanye West getting off the reservation, that we can kind of peel the black folks away from the Democratic plantation. And that's what I hope happens. And the optics of this hearing, I mean, like I said, it's amazing how, like, we all talk like we reason through verbal skills and words, but so much is more effective symbolically and going into people's subconscious. That's what advertisers do. That's how they advertise. They use colors and scheme. And the optics of this hearing was a disaster for the Democratic Party. I don't know. And I just think that that's great, because what they tried to do was as vile as the McCarthy hearings, even though McCarthy was sort of right.
Absolutely. Or the Salem witch trials, guilt by accusation,
right.
No defense allowed.
But I got to tell you something, Mike. What scared me is I talked to my mom on Saturday, and her and my sister, both very educated people, my neighbor was gang raped, therefore he's bad, he's a prep boy, college guy, he reminds me of our neighbor who I never liked, and I'm like, my God, there's just no reasoning. It was just such an appeal to base emotion. And even people, like I said, I was kind of shocked by it and angered, but, it's my mom, so what can I say? But these are sophisticated, educated people, and I don't know, I think it's a woman thing. I don't know what else to say.
Well, again, the way the Democrats operate, like you said, so do advertisers. They grab by the emotions. They don't want to have a discussion that's based on facts, logic, and law. They would lose that. They want to grab you by the emotions. The same thing when the U.S. government wants to get you into a war. They're not going to sit down and say, we need to have a war because we need this pipeline right away and we want access to these resources and everything. No, they'll grab you by the emotions, like a 9/11 or a Pearl Harbor or a sinking of the Lusitania, something like that. They go for the shock value.
Yeah, no, that's what they do. But hey, one other thing about this Kavanaugh thing, they're really underplaying the CIA connections with this Ford lady, Blossom Ford, and her family. And I find it interesting. I was talking to my brother about this, and it was like, I think it's almost like a fight between the Bremen left CIA and the Bush right CIA, because Kavanaugh's the Bush kind of guy. Yeah. And it's almost like Trump's just sitting back because he doesn't really kind of care probably for either side, and it's just kind of like sitting with a smirk watching them throw mud at each other. Yeah. And I don't really hear too many people, like, because I monitor all kinds of radio shows and TV. I'm kind of sitting here like it's Control Central, and I don't really, except for Michael Savage, and even Alex Jones, all he does is talk about himself. But they're really underplaying the whole CIA angle here. But I think that's like the quiet story to watch.
Well, I don't know that there's that much detail or substance to it. Anyway, listen, Joe, the phone lines are loading up. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network and go back to the phones to Scott in California. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. On Friday, I caught some of the hearings on Friday morning, West Coast time. I was in California. And then later in the afternoon, I was driving through Sacramento, which, of course, would be a Democratic enclave. And I was listening to the afternoon radio show that anybody would listen to for commute traffic. And it's a very popular show, KFBK out of Sacramento. Yes. And then the lady running the show, she had this call-in thing for a call-in poll. Who do you believe, Kavanaugh or Ford? And, I just let it go. But later I was listening to her, and she said that she was stunned at the enormous response and also at the results. It was 61% in favor of Kavanaugh.
Yeah, but right now on the liberal media, they're all rushing out all kinds of bogus polls to say the majority of American voters don't want Kavanaugh. He shouldn't be confirmed. Again, they're not giving up on this thing. And we know that corporate media polls are manipulated. They just make this stuff up. You know, talk to your friends and neighbors. You know, take the measure of the public opinion with the public that you personally know. And I started doing that years and years ago, and I kept finding out time and time again, no, my neighbors are not thinking what that TV set told me they were thinking.
Well, that's why we have RBN. Oh, by the way, thanks for reminding me. It's October 1st. My $25 went in right after you said that. Okay, Michael, talk to you later. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Frank in London. Frank, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
All right, Mike. Just about the Kavanaugh case. I can't believe that anybody in their right mind, you don't have to have a high IQ or anything of the sort to understand that case is a complete and utter fraud, because there is no corroborative evidence at all whatsoever. The people who Ms. Ford mentioned that were there, they said they weren't there. Some say that the event never happened. I think this is just to show you that the Democrats, now you have to rename them the Democrats, because if they really believe that they can legitimately govern a country with that kind of smut and smearing good people's name, it's not going to work. And I don't care for the Republicans or the Democrats either way, because like I said before, it's the alligators against the crocodiles. But this is just hit a new low, and if they ever get into power, you see a complete dismantling of America, a complete dismantling. It will be over.
Yeah, they
definitely.
The liberals feel like they're running out of time, and they want to push their agenda through. The globalists, the anti-gunners. It's going to be very, very tense. But our nation is clearly in decline. We're seeing the same kind of extremism, excessivism that we saw in ancient Rome as it began to fall apart. When you step back,
as you have a good take in history, it's the same pattern all the time.
Yes,
it's the same pattern. Whenever an empire is collapsing, you see all this weird. These people come up with all these carefree, ludicrous ideas, and and pass themselves off as intellectuals. It just becomes a total joke and smart people's name. Then you can go and write a book about it. It's just that the Democrats, it seems like they seem to want to thrive and win their way into power based on scandal.
Well, they don't have anything else to work with. I mean, they don't really have a platform. They've run out of ideas. The ideas they're putting out now are silly, like, let the guys use the girls' restroom. I mean, that was just. But I have to wonder what people in other countries looking at that kind of stuff really think of us as a nation. Anyway, listen, Frank, sorry to do this to you. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back with more phone calls after these few words. Okay, and there is a flashing this is just the test of the emergency alert system. I thought they were going to scream there was another ballistic missile headed in on us. Okay, so we're going to take another phone call. This one also from London. This is Robert. Aloha. Welcome to the show. Thank you for waiting. And what's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I did actually send you an email because you were having troubles at the beginning of the program, and I was listening to all your troubles and all your concerns. I was very surprised. I was watching the Crosstalk, the RT program Crosstalk, which I enjoy a lot, and there was a Democratic spokesman on this program, and they were talking about Kavanaugh and the situation, and I was really surprised that you had 3 interviewees, and 2 of them they'd all talk about whatever it is they wanted to say, and the Democratic spokesman would reinterpret their words lyingly, so easily, and so without thought. He could just so easily misinterpret what they said. And the program was then taken up by the other 2 interviewees saying, no, that's not what I said. and I was just really amazed at the lying is the new normal.
Yes. Yeah.
And
it does seem like
it was just
it's become
so easy.
acceptable. You know, and it's another example of how our nation, our culture, our civilization, if you will, has lost its moral compass. It's lost its sense of ethics. Right now, the attitude is say anything, do anything, just as long as you get what you want. That's all that really matters anymore.
Yeah, and you think that you're going to get somewhere by it, and you don't. But I have to say that I believe that
actually a lot of people do. I mean, look at the Clintons, look at our politicians. They have very exalted, comfortable lives from being the kind of people that they are.
Okay, I was just thinking that America's fault really lies from the very beginning. The way the Red Indians were treated,
yes,
has been the way that the world has been treated ever since. And that is America's attitude. So that's my comment.
Basically is, but you know, it's historically unfair to sort of draw a line saying that the U.S. treated the Native Americans very badly, which they did. But government as a whole tends to treat all of the people pretty badly. You know, the public will push back on that until some kind of an equilibrium is found. But it really comes down to the fact that there are people who are just, you know, so in love with themselves, in love with money and power. Their attitude eventually is whatever's going to work, whatever's going to get me what I want. If I have to tell a lie, I'll tell a lie. And what is really alarming is, again, getting on back to some of these talk shows that we're seeing, is you'll see them lie right on the air, and they're challenged on it, and then they just go back and forth. It's like a lie is no longer something to be ashamed of. It's become a weapon. You know, it's a dueling lies. I should get my banjo out here. And I guess there's a certain type of television audience that enjoys watching this kind of stuff, of these people just screaming back and forth at each other. I personally find it, you know, distasteful.
Okay, can I just say that I had worked since 1970. I worked with Americans who were very much this sort of hippie type, who had quit America, as it were.
Yes.
And so for the last nearly 50 years, I have been in the conversation, what is wrong with America? And the Americans could tell you everything, you know. And the thing is that Americans are very high. They have a sort of high-spirited kind of go get you. Let's do the job. You know, here's the job. Let's go do it and get it. And of course,
we're losing that.
Say, okay.
Yeah, we're losing that. I mean, right now, especially looking at the liberal agenda, the attitudes, you know, we want to sit down and cry until somebody gives us what we want.
Well, things have changed. You know,
yes,
sadly so. Thank you very much, Michael. It was really nice to chat with you.
All right.
There's so much I'd like to talk about another time.
Yeah, another time. And thank you very much here. We're going to let you go. We have other callers standing by, but I'm not going to take those calls until after the next commercial break here, and to fill the space between here and the start of that commercial break. Apparently, U.S. Reserve managers are now starting to shift away from the U.S. dollar and go into Chinese yuan. And that's a troubling sign for the country. The dollar is in trouble. People have lost confidence in it. Poland is starting to buy gold for the first time in 20 years. We'll be right back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the telephone, starting with Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike, you said something last week about Kavanaugh that caused me to do a complete reversal on him. You said, I forgot the exact words that you used, but it was something that he is kind of behind the NSA spying on American citizens.
No, he's not behind it. He's not behind it, but he thinks that the current degree of surveillance is consistent with the Fourth Amendment. And obviously, I disagree with him on that point.
But that's a very serious thing. That's much more serious than Roe v. Wade. I mean, that's a constitutional violation. And anybody that takes a position like that, I don't think we need them. There's plenty of conservative people out there you can get. You know, because if he's willing to bend the Constitution a little bit on that, you know, how far is he going to go?
Well, see, we're in a bit of a corner here. We're in a bit of a corner. If Kavanaugh is not confirmed, there will not be, in fact, the Democrats take Trump, throws up his hands and says, okay, I'll nominate a liberal.
Okay, I understand that position, but still at the same time, I'm not going to support somebody that is not solid for our rights for the Constitution. You know, that's all I want to say, Mike. But thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. And if you got any more, you know, cases about him that he ruled on in the past that are questionable as far as the Constitution goes, I appreciate you doing what you did before. You know, you brought it up on the air.
Well, you know, here's the thing. I think that if you were to walk into that Supreme Court, you would not be able to find any one of those judges that you agreed with on every issue 100%. We all have different points of view. I disagree with Kavanaugh on the Fourth Amendment interpretation. But again, if you look at any liberal nominees for the Supreme Court, they're going to say exactly the same thing. They're all gung-ho for spying on us. And the problem with the liberal Supreme Court judges, they'd also have a very different interpretation of the Second Amendment. So we're back in the lesser of two evils kind of territory.
But you're thinking that, you know, if we wait past the end of the year, then the Democrats might take control of Congress, right?
Well, we'll know that in November, obviously, but the new Congress will not be reseated until the end of January. And there just isn't enough time between now, the 1st of October, and the end of January to locate and vet another conservative candidate for the Supreme Court. And so we're kind of stuck. We're either going to go with Kavanaugh or we're going to let the Democrats shift the Supreme Court back toward liberalism, and I think that would be a tremendous mistake.
Well, you're assuming the Democrats are going to win.
I know they're going to try and steal it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's play it safe and take them then, I guess.
I agree with you. Anyway, Terry, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Mike, while everybody was talking about this, circus there with Kavanaugh and this woman who I think is nothing but I hate to say it, but a lying slut. You know, I don't think anything happened to her. She was putting out an act. But I was covering some real news. And, again, on the net. And one of the things, actually I heard this before you talked about it today, about Zinke, what he said about blockade. This man's a madman. That's all I can say. I know he's ex-Navy SEAL. I don't care. I don't care what he is. He's a madman. And I was also, this weekend, mostly in the evenings, but nothing else to do, I was watching, the Duran. I don't know if you ever watched the Duran.
No.
It's not so it's very good. It's kind of related to it's not part of RT. Actually, I think it's out of Greece, but they're very close. Like Peter Lavelle of Crosstalk is on there quite a bit, and it's very good. It gives you a lot of. I also watched. I don't know if you know this guy on Blackstone Intelligence. I can't pronounce his name right now. It's kind of complicated name to pronounce. Jake Monafonio, something like that. And he was described. Did you ever hear of him? Or you ever seen him?
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's very good. I wish he'd be nice to get him on the show. And he was basically showing how the war starts and who's behind Trump. And it's a very scary thing when you look at it because he makes it clear that Trump was bailed out by, of all people, George Soros.
Yes.
A few years ago, some project had and he says it's in the records, in the record book in Chicago, and also the Rothschilds bailed him out of his bankrupt when he was bankrupt, and he was just about to really go under. And the Rothschilds, in the form of Wilbur Ross, who's Commerce Secretary now, bailed him out. So this guy is, this guy is not who we think he is. He's coming from all over the place. He will go along with the war garbage. He is dangerous. He is dangerous just because he's not only unpredictable, but he seems to be bought and paid for by some of the worst elements.
Yes.
This is why we got somebody like what's his name, Bolton in there, or that's why we got Pompeo, and all these other neocons. He could have easily taken somebody like, let's say, Paul Craig Roberts, made him his security advisor. I mean, Roberts is a known fact. He works for the. He was part of the Reagan administration, and there's a number of other people he could have taken.
Yes.
First of all, he shouldn't have given up on Flynn. So Trump is not who a lot of people think he is.
No, he's been a disappointment. There's no question. He's a disappointment.
And he's weak. He's not that smart either. And that's what this guy, the guy on Blackstone Intelligence, makes clear too. He's not a very smart guy, and basically we're in trouble because I'll tell you something. Something like a blockade. Putin's a lot of Putin seems to be a very patient man. He knows to use like political judo. He's a judo expert, a real political judo and real, 40 or 5D chess, not the phony that people think that Trump has. And after what happened with with that jet there,
yes,
and the Israelis, he's now practically checkmated them because those F-300 probably shoot down anything Israel throws at them, or the United States throws at them on their missiles or planes. And,
well, Israel's still threatening to attack those S-300 battalions, but obviously it's a very tricky situation to go on in against an air defense system in aircraft. And, the closer you get to a radar, the stronger the return is. It doesn't matter how stealthy your aircraft is. If you're right in the immediate neighborhood, they're going to get a hit off of you.
Not only that, they've got that electronic jamming device. It's like just the same thing jammed that ship with that time. They don't realize what they're dealing with. They're dealing with another superpower who's probably got better weapons than we have.
It's they're
not extended all over the world.
It's starting to look that way.
They're not overextended all over the world. Yeah, they're not trying to push anything all over the world. They're not in the South China Sea. They're not threatening to overthrow the Venezuelan government. They're not doing anything. All they want to do is protect their own borders and a few allies. Well, they're not really allies, sir, but the few countries that they know they have to protect because they know if they if Assad goes down, their place is going to be run by terrorists, and a lot of these terrorists are going to make it back up to the Caucasus, and that's what Putin's worried about, and a lot of the Chechens over there are worried about that too. They don't want these people back in the country, and that's that's the people don't understand this. Meanwhile, I hate to say this country because I'm certainly not, you're certainly not, but this government and this corporations and whatever else you've got there are actually supporting terrorists. Netanyahu, to me, is a criminal.
Yes.
People just don't understand this man is about as evil as it ever gets. Okay? He may be worse than Erdogan, who's also a bad guy, but I mean, he is really bad news. The Iranians, at the same time, what are they trying to do? They're trying to protect Syria. The Iranians, there's a Christian community in Iran. There's a Jewish community in Iran. They're allowed to practice their religion and everything else.
Yes.
They're not what they're made out to be. And Trump is an idiot. He keeps on saying that the perpetrators of terrorism. He's getting that from a clown like Bolton and Pompeo and whoever else.
Right now the United States is the world's largest sponsor of terrorism. I'm sorry?
United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia. United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Britain, too. Let's not forget Britain.
Yes.
Britain is not exactly angels either. I just hope that guy, what's his name, Jeremy, what's the guy, the socialist name who's running in Britain, who hopefully will become the next prime
Corbyn.
Minister? Corbyn.
Yeah.
Let's just hope he wins and get rid of this witch, because she's bad news. I mean, she is a lying. I think she was behind this whole Skripal thing from the get-go. I think she ordered MI6 to carry this out, and they did. Maybe with help from the CIA. They probably don't need help from the CIA. They made it that they're the ones who carry this thing out, and they keep on mouthing off that's even though they've been caught now in the lie, they keep on and keep on. These two, I saw the interview with those two guys. Those two guys had nothing to do with that thing. They were legitimately scared and worried that they're exposed like this. They were basically, I think personally, they were two homosexuals, or two gay guys that were looking. They stated they were talking about they stayed there while telling share the bed together. Okay, but they said, I think that's sort of nervous about that. But they're not KGB agents or GRU agents. Nothing but Russia. Russia, when they do have intelligence people, those intelligence people know what they're doing. Okay, they're not going to hire a couple of clowns like that. Did you see the interview?
Yeah, I did. And I mean, to me, the fact that they were photographed window shopping in Salisbury, that's not how somebody who's just carried out an assassination behaves. They were just tourists. Anyway, listen, Mark, I got to let you go. We got callers on the line. We're starting to run out of time here. So let's switch over to Jim in Chicago. Jim, thank you for waiting so patiently. And what's on your mind today?
Hello, Michael. Regarding the Kavanaugh circus, the victims are not so much him or even her. The victims are the American public who are tolerating or being forced to tolerate that hearing. It should have been very private, but you can blame Feinstein and the other Democrats for leaking the letter, even though Dr. Ford, she wanted to be very private. So the victims are the American public. I mean, I feel like I've been taken advantage of by the Democrats, maybe some Republicans, and we really are not dealing with the major issues that's going on in the world, such as the Russian situation that you mentioned, the situation in Yemen, the economy. I mean, I could list a lot of things, and we're spending our time watching basically smut on television during daytime.
Well, I'm only watching during the radio show. Other than that, I turn it off. But when I was watching what was going on there, my main feeling was that of being insulted, that these politicians and officials actually think this is going to play with me. Apparently, polls are showing that people's opinion about Kavanaugh hasn't really been shifted by this situation. The Democrats are still opposed to him. The Republicans are in favor of him. They misplayed their hand. The Democrats misplayed it. If they were expecting a bombshell that was going to knock Kavanaugh out in a devastating blow, it didn't happen, and it's not going to happen.
Well, not only that, it doesn't matter what happens. If he makes it, fine. If he doesn't make it, that's fine. He's going to do fine no matter what. And it's the same thing with Dr. Ford. They're going to do fine quite in the long term. But the American people are suffering now, and it seems like we're going to be suffering a little more because these politicians are not really focused on helping the American public.
No, they're not. They're focused on politics. They're focused on money and power, and the larger a government grows, or the more powerful a government grows, the more concentrated power becomes. The more it attracts people who that's all they care about. And they're not really inclined to think about ordinary people. We're just here to pay the taxes and breed the soldiers and, work in the factories and, just make the nation run while they sit up there at the top and, say, we're the greatest nation on earth. Let's go invade somebody.
Right. Well, Michael, that's it. You take care.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike, this whole Kavanaugh thing, I really believe what you witnessed when you watched that was a dress rehearsal for whenever the Democrats take over the House and take over the House in January or November, whatever date you want to call it. I think it's a dress rehearsal for the impeachment of Trump. I think that's exactly what it was.
I saw an article with that exact headline, that when the Democrats take over the House, they're going to try and impeach Donald Trump. they're going to have to come up with something, though. You can't just impeach a president because you don't like him. It doesn't work that way. But you're right. They could turn it into a tremendous circus. And they could
I agree with you.
Get Trump so knocked out, tangled up with impeachment proceedings, he might actually have to temporarily step down and let Mike Pence take over the office. But you know the ultimate plan of the Democrats, if they win the House in November, is to get rid of both Trump and Pence, and that would make the Democratic Speaker of the House the new president.
I agree. And I think how they're going to do this, they're going to recycle everything from 2016. All the women that came forward with those fake allegations, that's how they're going to do it. But I do have a solution for the whole Kavanaugh thing.
Yes.
And I call it the castle move. Since everybody's talking about chess, I call it the castle move. Withdraw Kavanaugh's nomination, put forward Barrett Cohen. I think she's a much better candidate. And let's give the Democrats a woman. Let's see what they're going to complain about with her.
I don't know whether she has been vetted or not. I mean, there's a long, involved process. You can't just say, this is the new nominee. This is what I was trying to explain to that other gentleman. We're kind of in a corner. There isn't enough time to properly vet and prepare another nominee for confirmation. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So we're talking about the, actually, we have a caller on the line. Nathan in Northern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. Again, it's on the Ford Kavanaugh fiasco that happened last week. I watched the whole thing, on the internet, and what a crazy thing that was. And I wanted to ask you about product placement.
Yes.
If you want to put a product in a movie for a few seconds, the cost these days is about $22,500.
Yes.
And, that's just for a pack of cigarettes, on the shelf or something like that. Now, the Super Bowl, for a 30-second ad last year, was $5 million.
Yes.
For 30 seconds. Okay. So now that had 100 million viewers, a little more than that. So my question is what do you think that a Coke bottle in front of 20 to 30 million people, what would a product placement ad for that cost for an hour and a half? And 19.5 million viewers on the Comey hearing, and Kellyanne Conway mentioned 20 million viewers for the Ford Kavanaugh fiasco, and I say it's up to 30.
I don't know what the price would be. These things tend to get negotiated back and forth, but you're not the only person who wondered why there was a Coke can on the table and while Christine Ford asked for a cup of coffee. And so a lot of people wondered if it was product placement. Certainly, Congress would never officially sanction anything like that. So it may have been somebody who was just getting a little back-end deal, have a Coke can on the table and, we'll slip you something that you put in your coat pocket.
Well, I heard the guy say Coke. There was somebody in the background that said Coke. Now, they brought her a cup of coffee, and then they bought her a Coke bottle. And that bottle sat there for an hour and a half. And you can't tell me that that's not a 7-figure deal. My estimation is that was a $1 to $5 million to have that Coke bottle sitting at that hearing for an hour and a half. And my best guess is that Dianne Feinstein's lawyers, they negotiated that deal. And my best guess is that Grassley was cooperative. He could have called a 5-minute recess and had them pour the contents of the bottle into a cup and thrown the bottle in the trash can, but he didn't do it.
All right. Well, let me cut in here because we're almost out of time. First of all, we don't know that there was actually a deal made for product placement. The real irony, though, is that in the early days of Hollywood, they didn't dare put a recognizable product in film because the corporations would sue them. And finally, the corporations realized, wait a minute, we're missing a great advertising opportunity. And that's when product placement really began to take off. And it is a big business. There are companies in Hollywood where that is all they do. They look at scripts. They look at opportunities for product placement. They contact the involved companies. One of the biggest mistakes that was made on E.T., the extraterrestrial, they approached the M&M company, and M&M's turned them down, which is why it went to Reese's Pieces. Anyway, Nathan, got to let you go. Got to do station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and the phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443. The United States and Canada reached a last-minute deal to salvage the North American Free Trade Agreement. Now, they'd already come to this agreement with Mexico. They left Canada out. Canada was feeling aggrieved, but the U.S. And Canadian delegations got back together and hammered out a deal. Now, Trump is already out there saying that this new trade pact with Canada and Mexico will support U.S. jobs. But a lot of people aren't quite convinced, mostly because when the first NAFTA was signed, it was actually bad for American jobs because so much of our manufacturing went below the border where wages are lower and there's less regulatory compliance to worry about. So over at the nationaleconomicseditorial.com, they're reminding us all that when Bill Clinton promised NAFTA would create 1 million American jobs in the 5 years, it didn't happen. It absolutely didn't happen. And this article is saying that NAFTA 2.0 is not going to be a lot better. Now, Trump is right. NAFTA is one of the worst deals in American history, but what they've come up with is hardly any better. So after all that Sturm und Drang, doesn't look like things have really changed all that much. The European Union, which, as I mentioned earlier in the show, has turned thumbs down on Donald Trump's Iran bashing at the United Nations Security Council. They're sealing an oil deal with Iran. They're going to sign a huge contract, while it's still technically legal for them to do that. And then once the contract is in place, the EU is going to say, well, you can have sanctions now, but we've already got a signed deal, that we we need to stick to. And we're seeing a lot of countries are saying they're going to go on buying Iran's oil. Now, the EU is a huge customer of Iranian oil. They're going to be buying it. China is a huge customer of Iranian oil. They're going to be buying it. Turkey's going to be buying Iranian oil. I think Pakistan is still flipping back and forth about whether they're going to be doing that. But what it basically means is the world has turned away from the United States as a global leader. And they're going their own separate way. They don't want to be part of the U.S. government's hegemonic domination. They really had enough of that. And it's not like the United States can conquer the European Union and Russia and China and all these other countries. All they can do is say, well, we're going to sanction you. But the U.S. government is sanctioning and tariffing itself into political and economic isolation. And I don't think it's going to work out very well. Over in Rome, major protests against the budget plan announced by the government last week. And apparently the issue is, as we see in this country, the new budget is quite a bit larger than the old budget. Now, Rome's government doesn't quite spend as much money as the U.S. government, but they spend a lot. And there's going to be a sharp public spending increase that will push the budget deficit to 2.4% of the gross domestic product. And the Romans are not happy about it. But Italy's government partners, the Five Star Movement and the League, pressed for money to fulfill campaign pledges, namely a basic citizens' income for job seekers and a flat tax. Over in Germany, one of Angela Merkel's staunchest allies, Volker Kauder, he's been in power for 13 years, and he just got voted out of office in the Christian Democratic Union. And they're saying it's not the end of Merkel, but it definitely is a tremendous defeat. So this whole era of open borders and globalism and everything hopefully is coming to an end. Okay, over in Los Angeles, the owner of the Los Angeles Times, billionaire Patrick Soon-Shiong, advocated for a change in how people consume news on social media, calling misinformation and how it's spread the cancer of our time. Here comes the push to find some way to shut down social media and drag everybody back to the traditional corporate media, even though we know it lies to us pretty much all the time. But this is the war. This is the war. The liars versus the truth tellers. The corporate media versus independent media versus peer-to-peer media, which is really what it's all about. And they're scared. The audiences and ad rates for all the corporate media are down. Every week it seems like there's another embarrassment. And those with things to hide are very upset that they are being revealed on social media. So everybody is now talking about censorship, censorship, censorship. And Facebook is taking on yet another propaganda partner. Let's see, the National Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute. Basically, these are going to be filtering Facebook based on government agenda. Not what's true, not what's accurate, not what's factual. It's just like 1984. It's all sanitized and rewritten for public consumption. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We have organizations like the Anti-Defamation League that they're working with Facebook, Google, and YouTube. They have set themselves up as the official censor of all things internet, which is why we all have to look at alternative means of communication. Email lists, fax machines if we have to, shortwave. By the way, speaking of Facebook, there's a Facebook page entitled "Kill Trump, Hang Him, Hunt Him." And it was reported to Facebook because it seems very threatening. And it was reported for hate speech, but Facebook said it does not violate the Facebook community standards. Their bias is showing again. It's basically what it is. Now, a former senior research scientist at Google, Jack Polson, is saying that oversight of Google is urgently needed, that they have basically lost their ethics. They've cashed in. They're compromised. Probably they've been infiltrated by intelligence agents, the way the corporate media has. And in his letter, basically, he's talking about Google's censored China search project as unethical, and there needs to be greater oversight and accountability. He also claimed Google was clamping down on internal investigations to stop future revelations from ever reaching the public. And Polson is calling on the Senate to have a hearing over the matter. These social media companies need to be declared public utilities. And that hopefully will be the ultimate outcome. I mean, when the telephone company first started up, when Alexander Graham Bell was out there running wires and ringing bells, it was a private company. So, okay, I'm sorry, something I had to take care of. We're dealing with issues again here. Over at YouTube, responding to pressure, they are now scrubbing Federal Reserve videos critical of the Federal Reserve from search results. So this is the clampdown. They don't want you knowing anything other than what they decide you should know. That's not freedom. It's not democracy. It's not a republic. That is tyranny and dictatorship. It's right out of Orwell. You will look at this. You will read this. This is what you will believe. Oh, okay. Finally. We have a guest on the line. His name is Willie. He's calling from Pennsylvania. And I asked him to call into the show because he's just one of all of these horror stories we hear about the VA. So, Willie, thank you for spending time with us today. And just kind of explain to our listeners where you are, what's happening, and how you got here.
Okay, Michael, my name is Willie Davis. I live in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I've been in the news lately as a veteran who was having yard sales to try to fund my funeral. And some guys came by the yard sale. They started a GoFundMe, and it set at $475 for a while. And then suddenly it shot up. Now it just went over $60,000. And how did I get here? Well, I had torn my meniscus in 2017. I'm sorry, in the fall of the year 2016. It took until May to get the surgery, and then after the surgery, I got some infections, and I developed huge blisters and open sores and deep sores on my legs. And I also developed a huge pain in my abdomen, which was my lymph node. And my complaints about those were only I was given prescriptions for creams and such. I wound up in the hospital this spring, and they suspected cancer. And this is the local hospital. Then I went to the VA hospital and had a biopsy. And it turns out it's terminal stage 4 cancer. Now, had the VA done a skin biopsy over a year ago when I had all these sores, then they would have found this cancer in a lower stage, and it could have been cured. But by ignoring my complaints, I wound up in a situation where I'm dying, and I could have been saved with a skin biopsy. It's not the only time the VA has misdiagnosed me or provided improper treatment, but this time it's going to kill me.
Yeah, I understand you're currently in a hospice.
Yeah, I'm a hospice taking care of me rather than the veterans. And, dying is painful. But I'm taking lots of medication. But the pain is still there. Just if I wasn't taking the medication, I would probably be out of my head with pain. So, the hospice is taking care of me at the moment.
Okay, now you're a U.S. Navy veteran?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, Michael, yes, I am.
Okay, and did you serve at sea, and if so, where?
Oh, yeah, I was, I actually joined the Navy Reserves when I was still in high school. I was gung-ho, and I went to monthly meetings. I went to boot camp during my Christmas vacation, and then I actually went to boot camp again when I re-enlisted in the regular Navy. I served on the USS Ponce, which was LPD 15. I don't remember exactly how long. It was quite a while. And we went on various tours, the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, the North Atlantic, and we were at sea a lot. I was electronics technician.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page for the ship. It's a nice looking ship. Anyway, the reason I wanted to call on in, because you and I were trading emails back and forth, I have gotten so many emails from other veterans who have just been ignored by the VA. And as a result of the neglect, conditions and illnesses that should have been easily dealt with early on were allowed to basically expand into things that were much worse. And it's not just the VA. I don't know if it's the paperwork requirement or whatever, but it's very, very difficult in this country now to get timely medical care. One of the reasons Claire's back has turned into the problem that it is, it was literally months before she could get into her HMO. And of course, we have only found out then she had literally fractured a vertebra in her back. And she's doing a lot better, but you know, she's never going to be back to the way she used to be. So anyway, again, I've heard this story from a lot of other people, and I wish you a lot of luck. And you know,
well, the VA does need some serious repair, and I think it's going to take more than Mr. Trump saying he did this or what. But right now, I see no indication that there's been any improvement in the VA. The people that were responsible for my care, they're still collecting their paychecks. They're still partying, whatever they're going to do. They're going to be living. I plan to live another 10, 20, 30 years, but they're putting me in the ground 10 or 20, 30 years before I would have lived my natural life. And what did they say, $10, $20? I don't know what a biopsy kit costs, but I didn't have to die. I could have been live. I could have been listening to your show and on your website for another 20 years.
How old are you right now?
I'm 66.
Okay.
I'm 66. I'm going to, you know, if people ask me, will they give you a time frame? No, it's terminal. They told me it will kill me. I have the pain that tells me it doesn't. I don't think I have long, but when they ask how long do you have left, I don't want to know. If it's another couple of months and you tell me that, I'm going to spend a couple of months dying. But right now, I'm going to try to cram as much stuff I can't I can't really go anywhere. I've been invited to the Grand Ole Opry because of this. There's no way I can go, but I'm going to try to listen to music. I'm going to try to enjoy my breathing above ground for a while. I don't want to know how much longer I've got.
Well, listen, all I can say is good luck and keep up your courage. Thank you for your service to the U.S. military.
Can I say one more thing, Michael?
Yeah, one more thing.
Can I say one more thing? Okay, Michael, we're the money raised so far has been well beyond what I need for my funeral. So the guys who started and we just had a meeting here at my house. We plan to start a foundation. We know we could help one or two, maybe three more veterans that are dying with the remaining money. But we're trying to figure out how to start a foundation that will continuously be able to help vets that are in similar situations to mine. So the money that was donated, it's not going to be spent on me personally. It's going to dying vets, not only myself, but those in the future. So we do want to help others.
All right. Well, It's a very noble objective, and I wish you a lot of luck. And thank you very much for the phone call. And again, keep courage. So thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here.
Thank you and Claire for the work y'all do.
All right. Thank you. I'll forward the message. Okay. All righty. I've traded emails with Willie, and there were a lot more details in the emails that we didn't get to. But I've seen so many of these stories where people who have served in the military, they'll come back, they'll have medical issues, and they're just not being taken care of in a timely manner by the VA. And in the case of skin cancer, which can get very aggressive, apparently he pointed it out the earlier time he was in the hospital. What is this on my arm? And they just ignored it. And by the time they came on back and realized what it was way, way too late. Okay, getting on back to computers and censorship. Over at Reddit, users who question 9/11 are now being quarantined and directed to the official U.S. government site about 9/11. So anybody questioning the official story of 9/11 is verboten on Reddit. So Reddit, Uber alles. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about computers. And we've been talking about alternatives to the corporate social media. And DuckDuckGo is now my default search engine. And their traffic is exploding. People are switching on over to it. Now, of course, that carries with it the risk that when it becomes big enough, the government will attempt to infiltrate and control it. The liberals certainly will, to once again take control of what you think. But again, coming up with new versions of this stuff, maybe a peer-to-peer search engine that's living on everybody's computer, and a little bit of the data is, saved on everybody's computer, and you're not going to be able to control that. And there's no corporate structure. There's no ad revenues. It's just crowdsourced. And people code this together to search the internet free of any kind of filtering or interference. There has to be a way. Or at some point, we're going to have to demand that social media be nationalized, be declared a public utility and subject to the same rules as any other public utility, like the telephone. They're not allowed to pull the plug on your phone call if they don't like what you're saying. And the same should be true for these social media companies. Now, here is an interesting story. It's from activistpost.com, and it's talking about a documentary called Wi-Fried. And apparently, a lot of people are becoming more and more concerned about the cumulative effect of cell phone and Wi-Fi radiation, especially around children. And that is why an increasing number of schools in the U.S. are replacing Wi-Fi internet with a safer wired internet. And apparently many doctors have been recommending this for a while now. So we'll see what's going on there. Here at Holly Rivero, it's mostly wired internet. Obviously things like the cell phone are on Wi-Fi. Here's political correctness meets Silicon Valley, and you're not going to believe this. One of the computer languages that's out there is called Python. Was created by a guy, Guido van Rossum, and he's basically retired now. But he's coming on back in saying that maybe the terms used to describe technical operations need to be changed. For example, no more master and slave, which is a very common pairing of terms in computers, both hardware and software. And because that's now offensive to black people and reminds people of America's peculiar institution. Actually, it wasn't peculiar to America. Every nation's had slavery at one point in its history. So basically, they're going to go on in and they're going to change the language, the compilers, and the documentation and code to terms like parent or worker or something similarly politically correct. And this is just getting silly. This is just getting silly. This is very, very serious. If you want to travel to New Zealand now, you have to agree to a digital strip search. That means that you will have to give your phone or laptop password to customs officials on demand. And they will take the device and forensically search it. If you refuse, it is a $5,000 fine. Now, Customs Minister Chris Fa'afoy said these digital strip searches are necessary because a lot of the organized crime groups are becoming a lot more sophisticated in the ways they're trying to get things across the border. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Customs Minister, but did it ever occur to you that a real criminal or terrorist is going to know better than to have compromising information on their public electronic device? They're going to have, micro SD cards and hollowed out coins. Because those micro SD cards, you can get 64 gigs on those right now. But organized criminals are smart enough not to keep incriminating files on their devices. It really is out of control. $5,000 fine. Over at WikiLeaks, Kristen Hrafnsson, that's Hrafnsson, has now officially replaced Julian Assange as the WikiLeaks editor-in-chief. And apparently there are some financial incentives being applied to Ecuador for them to basically give him up so they can burn him at the stake here. Okay, Tim Berners-Lee was one of the developers and inventors of the World Wide Web. And that, of course, he's not talking about the internet. He's talking about the web browsers and the original language that allowed you to link from one document to the next, to the next, to the next. That's the World Wide Web. And a lot of that work was done at CERN. More about this when we come on back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. So we're talking about one of the creators of the World Wide Web. He's sort of the figurehead, and that's Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who basically came up with this idea of hyperlinking. And back in those days, it was simple. HTML, a document, you'd put it on up there, and fun things would happen when you click the links here. He is now saying his brainchild is an engine of iniquity and division, that it is... He started this all with the idea of sharing of information that would benefit mankind. But he's saying it's become swayed by powerful forces who use it for their own agendas. We're certainly seeing that. And so in the wake of that breach of millions of people's Facebook data by Cambridge Analytica, he's revealed he's working on a whole new online platform that would help users regulate the personal information they share online and how the data is stored. So he's coming up with a whole new system. Now, if you are one of the people who forked over $1,000 for an iPhone XS or XS Max, you need to be aware there is already a bit of a problem being reported by some of the users. And that is that there are conditions under which the devices will not charge even when plugged into a power supply via the lightning cable. And basically, they're saying that if the device is not charging, tapping it up or picking it up to wake the device will start the charge cycle. In other words, if it's in sleep mode, if you've put it down and it's blacked out and you just stick the cable in it without waking it up, it doesn't detect the charger. Now that's a bit of a design goof here. Okay, as you know, California passed, one of the few laws I agreed with, a net neutrality bill for the state. All carriers have to treat all traffic equally. This applies to companies like AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon. All traffic must be given equal priority on the system. Well, the Department of Justice has just announced it's going to sue California to invalidate the new law. So there's going to be another showdown between the federal government and states' rights. And again, this ending of net neutrality, it's a giveaway to the big corporations. They get the high-speed lanes for content delivery, and everybody else gets shoved over into a corner. So we'll see what happens with that one. This is a weird story. One of the issues with medication is that when you take it, it goes everywhere in your body, including the places that may not need it. And there's been a lot of work trying to develop ways of targeting medication, and one of the newest is this little tiny robotic caterpillar that you swallow. And it can basically go down the GI tract and deliver medication at a specific site, say an ulcer. And That's kind of cool. I mean, if it's very tiny, it's not much larger than an ordinary tablet, but that's going to be kind of interesting. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Sovereign Man. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I just want to give you an update on the micro SD manufacturing process. They're actually up to 256 gigabytes.
Wow, that is a lot of gigabytes.
Yeah, it's like a little hard drive in your fingernail.
Yeah, it really is. And for people like me who started with the very early days of computers, I remember when I took my first programming class at junior college, and we all had to buy our own hard disks to put our work on. And the disk was something like 20 inches across, and it held 5 whole megabytes. And now to just see these amazing things here.
Yeah, was that a 3-inch? Was that a 3-inch or a 5-inch hard drive?
No, this was like 16-inch across. It was a hard platter.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, it was a hard platter.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I know that they had 2 different types of floppy drives, and then
that was
their
much
hard
later.
disk.
That was much later. The floppy drives came along a lot later. There was the 8-inch floppy drives, then the 5 1/4, and then the 3.5-inch floppy drives. And now, of course, it is all flash drives and direct downloaded stuff. Even the CD may be going away soon.
Oh, it is. It's gone by the by. I mean, when you get a product and it has a driver in it on a CD, you just throw that away. You go to the website and download the latest driver.
Yes.
But by the time you get that disc in the box, it's over a year old. Seems like.
Well, that's one of the things that really bothers me about computers and software is they're shoved out the door into the hands of the users, and you have to live with this constant process of, we found another problem, we're going to fix it, and you're downloading these updates to your machines, which oftentimes, especially recently with Microsoft, they cause more harm than good. And there have been cases where updates to various smartphones will actually brick them. And it's amazing how reckless the industry has become because they don't face any consequences. There's no product liability for computers and software. They were indemnified all the way back in the days of Apple and the IBM PC.
I got an Android. Actually, I'm talking on an Android with Lollipop still on it, and I'm not updating it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I do. If I have a stable system, I turn off the automatic updates. Of course, then I have to deal with the fact that it's constantly nagging me. You've got to update it, and I turn off the update service, and it's just a pain.
I got a Windows 10 hybrid, and man, it was giving me a real fit. It actually, I think I hit some malware, and it corrupted my Firefox, and man, it really slowed down my my boot log. Took forever for it to boot up.
Well, that may indicate that you got some malware on that machine, and I've had 2 experiences with Windows 10. The first time was when we allowed one of Claire's choir machines to auto-update. That was a disaster, and we tried to use the option to roll back to the previous operating system. That actually didn't work all the way correctly, and the machine was so messed up, I literally just threw it in the trash. I have a laptop now that's running Windows 10, which I'm using to try and learn Windows 10, but the more I work with it, the less and less I like it. And that's why when I start building a new system for my desktop, I want a Windows 7 box. And I know I sound like this old fogey, I don't want the newfangled thing out here. I want what's reliable and what I know.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I noticed on the new one, this thing updates when it feels free to do it. So I noticed that it says if you want to, how do you say, freshen up your system, it has an option where it will clean up everything. It'll take. I'm afraid to do it though, but it'll take all the apps off that will conflict, and it won't. It says that it won't mess with your personal data, but it'll speed it up. It'll update it and
yeah, but you just said it's going to take off the app, so you'd have to do all those reinstalls. One of the things that I was dealing with over the weekend with this Windows 7 machine here is how very often the official documentation from Microsoft is flat out wrong. You know, I was trying to get to the tool to make sure that my system files were okay and what they're supposed to be. Couldn't get it to run from either the console or the install disk. It's a disaster. They've lost control of their own technology.
I just recently went to the, I guess it's the Defender / Security Essentials, page where you can, download the latest, how do you say, the latest version of software for the update or whatever to keep it current.
Yeah.
And they have a Windows tool, diagnostic tool. Oh, all it is it's just the Windows Defender, software.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no different. It's not a tool. Just Windows Defender software.
It is a mess. I remember when I was a kid, computers were fun. It was something you did as a hobby. It was off to one side, and they lasted forever. I've got a Commodore VIC-20 here from the early 1980s. Still runs just fine. Let me finish my thought here. Let me finish my thought here.
Yeah.
Today, our lives are dependent on machines which are intentionally designed to fail after 5 years, to force us to buy all new equipment, all new software, spend the months rebuilding the system that we had before. And like so much else in this country, it's just become another racket.
Yeah, it's like the movie, The Light Bulb Conspiracy.
Yes.
Engineered obsolescence.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I'm going to break out my old Mercano set. Remember what is it? We used to have Erector sets. Remember them?
Yeah, I remember those. I loved Erector sets when I was a kid. In fact, I still had one of mine when we moved here. I gave it to the neighbor kid.
Yeah, look up the Mercano. That was like even before my time. And we're kind of around the same peer group.
Yeah, well, Erector set was the American version. Meccano came from Great Britain. Anyway, I need to let you go. We're running out of time, and I got a few more stories I need to get to. So thank you for the stroll down memory lane, and we're going to let you go. Okay, we've been talking a lot about self-driving cars, and there appear to be some shortcomings, and there have been some problems. And so all of a sudden, the marketing for these things is changing. They're no longer talking about self-driving cars, probably because of legal liability issues. And BMW just came out with their new camera-based driver monitoring system. It's called Extended Traffic Jam Assistant, and it's going to be available in next year's X5, which is the company's best-selling mid-sized SUV. And supposedly the X5 can drive itself, including steering, without the driver touching anything, all the way up to just under 40 miles per hour. But BMW is saying you shouldn't leave it up to the X5 to drive itself. The driver is still expected to pay attention to the driving, even if his hands are not on the control. But why have the self-driving system? If you're still having to pay attention to the driving, why not just drive? Sometimes it seems like our technology is truly becoming decadent. Okay. Over in Missouri, a family put up a billboard that said, "Vaccines can kill," and it features the son of a former MMA fighter. And the story behind it is that 20-month-old Nicholas Catone of New Jersey died suddenly in his sleep in May, just after receiving a DTaP vaccination. And there'd been nothing wrong with the kid before that. And there are a lot of problems with these multiple vaccines. Less problems with the single shots, but for some reason the pharmaceutical companies are just pushing, one shot. Diphtheria, tetanus, whooping cough, or mumps, measles, rubella. And so the parents are convinced their son was killed by the vaccine. I wonder when they're going to make it illegal to question vaccines on the internet, or when the social media will start filtering out articles critical of vaccination. Now, here's another study that you need to pay attention to. This came from cmsri.org, and it's talking about yet another study where there was a survey taken of homeschool children who were not being vaccinated versus students in school who had to go through all those mandatory vaccines. And basically what the study found was the homeschooled children, the ones without the vaccination, were far healthier. And they were saying, if you look at the general decline of health of Americans in general, and especially children, children today in America are 4 times more likely to have a chronic illness. That's chronic, meaning permanent, never goes away, requiring constant, repetitive treatment. And we have the most expensive medical care on earth, and yet the health of the American people is clearly in decline. So let's take a few minutes here to finish up the show with human-caused global warming. Back in 1989, the United Nations warned entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. It is now 2018, and all the nations are still there. But again, part of the push for a one-world government was based on the need for a global environmental authority to whom we would surrender all control over how we lived. But again, it was all hype and hysteria. And some of it gets a little bit silly here. The Washington Post actually came out with a story, yes, you can blame President Trump for Hurricane Florence. Apparently, the Washington Post is convinced that had Hillary won the election in 2016, there would be no more storms. They would magically go away. So, again, it's all pushing the agenda. The reality is there has been a 30% increase in Arctic sea ice volume over the last decade. 30%. That is a lot of ice. But the global warming people are still out there trying to find something to make you hysterical with. And apparently over at NASA, one of their scientists is saying, well, the Earth is starting to wobble on its axis. And the problem is all that ice that's built up on Greenland. And they're blaming that on climate change. But you know, nature is always about change. Everything changes in nature, not always for the better, as our friends down on the Big Island found out. We're going to take a break for a commercial, back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to our show. And as you know, over in Indonesia, they had a massive earthquake and tsunami. It's caused huge amount of damage. The death toll currently stands at 844. They're still trying to find survivors who are trapped underneath the wreckage. Indonesia doesn't really have what you would call a strong earthquake code, even though they get a lot of earthquakes. So authorities are saying it could be as many as literally thousands. So it's a bad system. Here is a good example of police overreach, if you will, along with idiocy. Apparently, Sid Tatum was enjoying a picnic at Chesapeake's Northwest River Park last week with his grandsons. And a park ranger basically came on out and asked Tatum and his sons what it was they were drinking. Now, it turns out they were enjoying some of Grandpa's homemade kombucha, which is a fermented tea. It's been around for thousands of years. You can buy it at the health food stores. The alcohol content is so low, children can buy it. And despite all of this, it's a health food rage. It's loaded with probiotics and vitamins and minerals, and the park ranger confiscated it all and kicked them out. Okay. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Anthony in Tucson, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I've been, paying attention to what's been going on in this country since 1962 when I was to a meeting in Odessa, Texas, picking up an aircraft. And the fellow there was explaining to the people how this country was being taken over and how the Democratic Party, which is a communist takeover by the name of Schiff, who were very unhappy with Taft, and that he was going to see to it they got their own president elected so they could change the morals, the money, and the law of this country.
Okay.
So they started with giving the women the right to vote against their husband. They canceled the husband's ballot to where only the machine would vote one way. Then they went with the income tax, which was to foster the Federal Reserve Bank system to collect the interest back from the people that were going to borrow the credit from the federal government, and they were going to even use that money to back up the interest payments that the Congress and the Senate, who I believe are in conspiracy and treason with the Federal Reserve Bank system.
No question. There's no question. Obviously, especially after the disaster of the first and second banks of the United States, Congress knew what they were doing when they voted through the Federal Reserve Act. Woodrow Wilson knew what he was doing when he signed it. They all knew that the Constitution vests Congress with the authority to coin and regulate money and does not allow them to delegate it to a private bank, but that's exactly what they did.
Right.
Anyway, Anthony, got to let you go. We're at the end of the program now. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. And please take what you learn here, share it with everybody. Email, word of mouth, SneakerNet, what have you. Please donate to RB and please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We're hanging on the edge here, as John Stedmiller says in that blurb there. So we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.